go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Philip Bankhead, a way past president of this club, standing in for current president. Can't hear me?
Bell, if we can't hear.
I was going to ring the bell after my formal introduction, but appreciate the help. Standing in for Jeff McNaughton, current president, who's out of town. I'll begin the meeting with the official ringing of the bell. All right.
And a hearty wrap it was.
Thank you. At this time, take a few minutes to mill around and say hello to people you haven't seen in a whole week or otherwise. We're going to do that for a few minutes and before we officially get started on the meeting. Please rise and mingle. Let me reiterate.
Yeah, you gotta like talk kind of directly into this. If you want to switch, both of these are on. You can use one of them.
Okay.
Just want to say hi.
Hey, Evan, how are you?
Hey, good.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. Now that I'm potentially working down closer here, it's going to be a lot easier for me to attend the meetings and stuff. So, I guess we're going to announce it. Everyone knows it. I guess we're going to announce the acquisition Tuesday, maybe.
Okay. Internal.
Yeah, I guess they don't want to like announce it publicly and start that until like Tuesday. So you're not. Your album is there. Is the office? Do they have actual offices there? Is it full already? Do you know? Is it just like more somebody else?
Yeah, coming up. There's actually moving somewhere else on
Just overall like culture.
I can't find the bucket, but I can improvise. We'll fill that up with
Okay, if I could get everyone to return to their seats. I knew that was dangerous to allow you guys to start talking. Mr. Pyrock, you may sit down now.
All right.
Thanks, Jay.
Good luck.
Okay, if everyone will continue to stand as we proceed with our program, Mary Bishop is going to lead our invocation. Herb. Thank you, sir. Mary Bishop is going to continue. Please, everybody, please stand. She's going to do the invocation, the pledge, and their national anthem. They'll lead us in the national anthem. Thanks, Mary.
Hello, good morning. Are there any joys or concerns? We usually do the joys with our happy bucks, but are there any concerns that you'd like to share today to update the club? Okay. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. And Lord, as we take a deep breath, We celebrate friends. We give you the honor and the glory. You're the God Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. We praise you for this day, this beautiful fall day, for the food you've prepared for us, for our friends, for the concerns that are unspoken in this room. You know, we lift them up to you. Father, we thank you for our speaker today. We thank you for truth. You say in your word to speak the truth in love. Father, let us speak the truth, but let us always do it with concern and compassion for those we speak to. Father, we lift up those around the world, our fellow Rotarians, the different nations, the different tongues, their different projects. Father, thank you for the service worldwide and the organization of Rotary that brings us together to serve, united as one front. Father, we give this day to you and thank you. In your name, amen. Now we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Say, can you see all the dogs turning light? What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, whose stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched, so gallantly streaming, and the wonders
Thank you, Mary. I forgot to mention that if you didn't have a chance to get your raffle tickets, which is support of our Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation, Mary Wall, I think, is still collecting those, and she'll be leading the raffle in just a second. Let's see. All right, now it's time for Happy Bucks. Mary referenced the fact that we share concerns in advance in one aspect, but then we either brag or celebrate during Happy Bucks, which also goes to benefit the club.
Just to start with, we've lost a Happy Bucks box, so if anybody's seen it running around, please let me know. But we're going to use this. We're going to improvise today. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay. And we're not too happy about it. We lost the Happy Bucks. Hey, just jumping off what Mary said in her prayer, I'm giving thanks for friends. After this meeting, I'm headed to Georgetown, Texas, my hometown, to celebrate our 40th high school reunion. So I'm happy about that. I made it.
You're young. I just celebrated my 50th. Anyone else?
I have one.
Going? Okay.
After a 3-year drought of University of Texas watching that kind of football against OU, happy to celebrate the thumping of the horns. OU has been way too long, but I believe the final score was 49-0.
In case anybody didn't know.
If anybody didn't know.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, doke. Let's, and then Scott, you're also going to lead us or have the microphone. Let's introduce guests at this time. Thank you.
Hello, I'm happy to introduce Shelley Lancaster. She is our guest. She's with the Legion's title, and she is here to join us. Happy
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
On the other side.
I just want to introduce Ms. Leslie. She came to visit myself and Doug.
Oh, good.
Hi, I'm with North Dallas Neighbors, launching a magazine in North Dallas, and glad to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Welcome to your guests. Come back and see us next time as well. Greg, I believe you're going to talk to us about the Rotary Foundation.
Thank you, past President Phillip. All right. What's so special about the Rotary Foundation for October? Good. Hey, glad to hear that. World Polio Day is going to be celebrated Monday, October 24th. Also, World Polio Day 2022 and beyond, A Healthier Future for Mothers and Children, will be held virtually or in person on October 21 through the 22nd in Geneva, Switzerland. The event will highlight the status of polio eradication and address the potential for community-based solutions that go beyond immunizations to enhance the health of mothers and their children. Rotary has an additional $150 million pledge towards future polio eradication efforts, and you can register online, no cost, rotary.org, for this virtually held event in Geneva. The recent detections of the polio virus in New York and UK have increased awareness of the disease's continued threat. Earlier this year, an unvaccinated man in New York was paralyzed and polio virus was detected in London. The moment presents an opportunity to highlight the importance of vaccinations as the only form of protection against polio and many other diseases. I'd like to ask two of our fellow Rotarians, Cindy Cummings and Herb Zeev, if you all come up, because these fellow Rotarians are doing their part by making major contributions to the Rotary Foundation, which supports polio eradication. And so, Cindy, we are proud to give you your Paul Harris Fellow pin. It's updated with 2 sapphires indicating a 3rd level contributor to the Rotary Foundation. Cindy Cummings.
Thank you.
Stay up here. And Herb, I've been polishing this all morning. It's looks awesome, and we're proud of you. And you've got a Paul Harris pin, 2nd level contributor, and we're also glad you're back with our Rotary Club. Thank you so much, Herb. Thank you. Thank you. Got it. Publicity. Thanks, Lee.
Michelle, if you'll work your way up here. Michelle Brown is going to join us and highlight our marketplace advertiser today.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Our marketplace sponsor today is David Goodson. Is David here? David represents RLG Consulting Engineering Providers, civil engineering, structural engineering, surveying, and forensic services to clients across Texas and the United States. Over the past 67 years, worked on numerous iconic DFW projects such as North Park Center, the Dallas Arboretum, Hockaday, Green Hill, as well as numerous projects at SMU, the Highland Park Independent School District, Baylor Scott and White, and Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital. Recent projects include the new administration building for Baylor, Scott and White, Discovery Plaza downtown, and renovations to the Dallas County Records Building. RLG staff includes 25 professional engineers and surveyors and over 65 total employees with offices in Dallas, Fort Worth, Peoria, Illinois. Club member David Goodson retired after 38 long years at the firm at the end of 2019 and was succeeded as CEO by club member Stuart Marcusson. Stuart represents the third generation of Park City's Rotary leadership at the company that Ray Goodson, a past president of the club, founded in 1953. And we would like to thank David Goodson for being our sponsor today.
Good idea. Thanks, Michelle. Roger, if you come on up. Roger Freidline's going to tell us about an upcoming program meeting, I believe.
Well, I am always amazed and impressed at our speakers each week, and I always learn something that I'm glad that I learned. And so you may wonder, how do these programs come about? And the truth is that there's a program committee, and guess what? All of you are on that committee. So we would love to have you come to the next committee meeting, which will be on Tuesday, October 25th, starting at 6 p.m. at the Moody YMCA second floor meeting room. And so I hope that you will attend.
Thanks, and please take that seriously. Exactly what Roger said, that the only way we have the great programming we have is because of your introductions and nominations and names and things. So that upcoming meeting is very important. For the next 6 months, we try to line up those speakers. Scott, if you and Doug would come up. Scott McLaughlin is going to introduce a new member. Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Doug Ferber, bring Doug Ferber into the club. I've introduced him, this is third time. I know. The last couple of times I introduced him as a prospective member, when in fact Doug was selected to be as a member 3 or 4 weeks ago. We just haven't had a chance to induct him, so this is our opportunity to do that. I'm not going to give his new member speech today. I'll just say that Doug is one of those who did not grow up in Texas, but he got here as fast as he could. He grew up in Brooklyn and is. Where did I get Brooklyn? I knew it was New York.
Part of Long Island.
Okay, somewhere up north, but no, it was Long Island. And moved here when he was 19 years old. He's an SMU grad. I think he's got a couple of degrees from there. Again, I'm not going to give his new member speech, but he's doing an outstanding job. He's a magazine launcher, and The High Life is the name of the magazine here in Highland Park and University Park. So please welcome to the club, Doug Ferber.
Thanks. Yeah, let's do this. Just 1 second. Oh, okay. And Doug, here's your new member packet.
I get a
Super-
badge. All right.
Yeah, get a red badge at this point. There's some information about Rotary and also a few things you need to go through to get engaged within the club. We look forward very much to your
Great.
membership.
Likewise.
And participation. Thank you. All right, super. With Mark Neeson's assistance, I'm going to roll through this exciting time to be a member of this club. There's a lot of different service projects on the horizon that I want to make you aware of. He's going to show them on the screen. I'm just going to roll through them. Tomorrow morning, everyone should know, I think we've got 37 out of our target 40. I think there's space. Susan Glenn is in charge of organizing this event of a North Texas food packing event out in the Plano distribution facility. So we could add a couple of the last minute sort of thing is what I'm pitching. But tomorrow morning, check in, I think at 8:30 or so. I think we pack whatever they tell us to do for a couple hours. It's a fun time for our club members as well as actually doing something important. So that's tomorrow morning. Next Thursday, the 20th, is the PCRConnect, the next meeting. So as Holly whooped, it will be, again, next Thursday, 5 to 7. They're trying a new place, the Thirsty Lion GASTROPUB out at Preston Hollow Village. That's Walnut Hill and Central Expressway, northwest corner. Pardon? Right by Trader Joe's. So that's always a fun time. Next Thursday, 5 to 7. And then a number of service projects are coming up in November, December. The Foot Care Project at the Salvation Army, Saturday, November 12th. The following Saturday, Dentistry with a Heart. We're adding 2 this year. One has historically been during the spring. We're adding 1 in the fall. It'll be at the Agape Clinic, and that's Saturday, November 19th in the morning. Then the University Park tree lighting is going to be the next day, Sunday, November 20th, at Snyder Plaza, of course, in the afternoon between 1 and 6. Scottish Rite popcorn packing has been set now for Thursday, December 1st. That's an evening volunteer opportunity. The following Saturday, Salvation Army Distribution Center bag packing will be in the afternoon between 1 and 3:30, Saturday, December 3rd. And then lastly, our holiday party is going to be on Thursday, December 15th at Lakewood Country Club. That's both a combined holiday party as well as celebrating C.C. Colley's 100th birthday. So that's going to be a great event, a lot of fun for everybody. So that's a long list. There'll be more details by the individual committee or team member leaders. I need to get with the program. They're teams, not committees. And so you'll hear more details about all those sorts of events as we get a little closer. Now, for the raffle drawing, Kathy Wall is in charge of this. Our tradition is that our speaker, Dr. Long, if you'll actually pick the... So Kathy's, so we've picked the number, and this gives you the opportunity to pick the ace of spades out of the deck, which is getting thinner by the week. Kathy, do you want the microphone to take over? 985-4285. 4285. Fantastic. Come on. Okay, super. So come on up here, yeah. And pick a card out of the deck, and then you can show it. And hopefully, if it's the ace of spades, you split the pot. Half goes to you, and half goes to the Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation.
All right.
Ace of spades is what we're looking for.
My grandmother always said, lucky in cards, unlucky in love. I've been pretty lucky in love, so I'm not going to win.
Who knows?
Nope.
4 hearts. Almost.
Okay,
Almost.
and then that goes out of the pile, right?
It does. You get to keep that card as a,
I get the card.
in commemoration. So that's one less card. The odds go up every week as we get closer to that point. So something, again, to just raise a little extra money for the foundation. All right. Now I'm going to turn it over to Siobhan Abraham, who's going to introduce our speaker today.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Stephen Long. He is the Carey M. McGuire University Professor of Ethics at SMU. Previously, he has worked at such prestigious institutions as Marquette University, Garrett, the Evangelical Theological Seminary, St. Joseph's University, and Duke Divinity School. He has a PhD from Duke University and is also an ordained United Methodist minister in the Indiana Conference. He works in the intersection between theology and ethics and has published over 50 essays and 16 books on theology and ethics. He is married to Rika, and they have 3 children and 3 great-grandchildren, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Long.
Well, thank you for the invitation to come and speak to you. It's when you're a theologian, it's good to be invited anywhere these days to speak. So I appreciate that very much. And thank you for your service. My father was a Rotarian in the Midwest, and I think I spoke to their club a few times in my life. So it's not my first go around with the Rotarians, but appreciate your work and your service very much. What do you do for a living? I've been asked that question on bicycle rides, on airplanes, once during life-saving heart surgery, and in many situations like this. And I have to say, it always creates a bit of a fear and trepidation to me, because I teach a discipline, moral theology, which was popular in the 13th century, and it's been a bit downhill since then. So I can tell people I teach theology, and then I'm prone to have awkward conversations about religion. People either assume that if I teach it, I'm not a practitioner, or that if I'm a practitioner, I might practice it the way they think it should be practiced. And once in a while, you even meet people these days who are militant atheists who want to explain to you why religion poisons everything it touches. So these days, I often, in those very brief conversations, say, I teach ethics. Now, it's interesting, when I say I teach ethics, I almost always get the same response. Everybody says, oh, we need more of that. I've never found a militant person against ethics. So I find this fascinating because, quite frankly, even though I've been teaching ethics for 30 years in various universities, I confess, I'm not always sure what I'm doing. I actually find it easier to teach theology than to teach ethics. It's an older tradition. It has clear ideas of what you're supposed to do, how you take students through the various loci. But when it comes to ethics, how do you teach ethics? Can ethics even be taught? I think that's an important question. Oops. There are difficulties in teaching ethics, and I would like to get through those difficulties with you today. I'm going to need my glasses. Ethics is unlike other disciplines in the university, and I hope to explain what I mean by each of these. Ethics is primarily a practical discipline rather than a theoretical one. But what we do in the classroom is almost always associated with theory. Teaching ethics can be potentially harmful. I'll explain what I mean by that. And then, of course, by the end, I have to say, since I do get paid to teach ethics, and I've been doing it for 30 years, why it is we should and can teach ethics. So I will do that as well. So let me take up these issues of difficulties in teaching ethics. Now, ethics is unlike other disciplines. So imagine this scenario with me, if you will. Imagine that you've started at the university. I have my godson Sam here with me, just started at Baylor University. I'm taking him to the SMU game tonight, so football game. Just started. Imagine you're a freshman at the university and you're called in by a university committee. And they ask you, explain to us Grignard reactions in organic chemistry. And you say, I have no idea how to explain Grignard reactions in organic chemistry. I haven't had my organic chemistry class yet. And they decide, no, you should know Grignard reactions before you even start in the university, so we're going to kick you out. That, of course, would never happen. Everybody would think that's unjust. Imagine this scenario. You're called before the honor council of the university, happens way too often. You've plagiarized your essay. Explain this to us. And you say to the committee, but wait a minute, I haven't had my ethics course yet. How would you expect me not to know how to plagiarize until I have my ethics course? Of course, you might very well get kicked out for plagiarism, even if you haven't had the ethics course, which says something, I think, telling about the difference between teaching ethics and other disciplines in the university. The university, at its best, the only way it can function is to assume a kind of ethical foundation. We assume that you have enough ethics that you can do what we ask you to do in the university. So on the one hand, we assume that learners already have ethics. You come to the university, it's assumed you already have ethics. Otherwise, we couldn't teach you. And on the other hand, we also think that ethics should be taught across the curriculum. That's my job as the McGuire University Professor of Ethics. It's to teach ethics across the curriculum because somebody thinks that's a good idea. But the question is, if we already assume you have ethics coming into an ethics class, what are we doing in the ethics class to teach you ethics? I think that's what makes this discipline in part unique and raises this question, which is really not my question. The question goes all the way back to the ancients. The question is Aristotle's question: can ethics be taught? And the answers have been mixed. Now, part of whether or not ethics can be taught depends upon what you think ethics is. What is ethics? What is ethics? Is ethics a discipline of what's known as practical reasoning? Practical reasoning is reasoning that can be other. There's not just one way of doing it. You go about it in a variety of ways. The person of practical reasoning is the person who is wise. Or is it an exercise in theoretical reasoning? Do you have to have the right theory to teach ethics? Now, in antiquity, for Aristotle, ethics is a discussion, he says, that does not aim at others do at study. Ethics is not about study, about theory. I mean, you all know this. I mean, it's not as if you know moral philosophy, you're going to be more moral than other people. I wish it were the case that in my class, after you've had a class in moral philosophy with me, I'm teaching a course right now called The Good Life to undergraduates, my favorite class to teach. But I cannot guarantee you that every student coming out of there is going to be a much better person than they were coming in. Now, Aristotle would make sense of that. He would say, well, of course that's right. Ethics is not about theory. Ethics is a practical discipline whose purpose is not to examine what ethics is, but the purpose is to make you become good, to become a better human being. And is that the task of a university professor? To make students better human beings? I actually think it is. And I think it's a very difficult, albeit an important task. Now, that's an ancient understanding of ethics, and it conflicts a bit with more modern understandings of ethics. The discipline of ethics as an academic study in the university really only came about in the 19th century. In 1850, there was a man by the name of Henry Sidgwick, a fascinating person. I just spent 8 years writing a book on Henry Sidgwick and the teaching of ethics, so I'm distilling that into 30 minutes maybe. No, I am. And Sidgwick was fascinating. His brother-in-law was the Archbishop of Canterbury. His father was an Anglican priest. He grew up with theology and religion all around him, and he rejected all of it. Up until Sidgwick's time, there was always a connection between theology, religion, and ethics, or even metaphysics and ethics, politics and ethics. There was no such thing as ethics as its own discipline with a distinct domain. Sidgwick wanted to make ethics a scientific discipline. So he wrote a very famous book, which, has anybody read Methods of Ethics from 1874? I'd be shocked. I've never found anybody who's read it unless you've studied ethics, and then you have to read it. It's a very boring book. It's so dull. And in fact, Alfred North Whitehead was a philosopher who, when he read that, he said he was so bored by it, he swore he would never study ethics again the rest of his life. So even Sidgwick thought it was boring, so I'm not just being critical. Now, notice what Sidgwick said about ethics. He says, my immediate object is to invert Aristotle's phrase, ethics is not practice but knowledge. So he wanted to make ethics a much more theoretical discipline, and he gave this definition of it. It's the science or study of what is right or what ought to be. Now, that's an important statement. And the reason he says it's what's right or what ought to be is because he said ethics is not about the good. The good is too amorphous. It's too contested. If I say to you, the good life is X, somebody would say, well, that might be your good, but it's not mine. But the right, he thought, could bring about consensus. So it's the right based upon voluntary action. That was his definition. And he thought if we could just do to ethics this is 1850, what science was doing in other disciplines, we would be able to come up with a method, like an algorithm, if you will, to make people make better ethical decisions. That's what he wanted, better ethical decisions. It's a voluntary action. 1850. How has that worked? How has that worked? My own sense is if somebody tries to sell you an app for doing ethics, something's gone wrong. There is no app for doing ethics. And if there is, I'm going to have to retire. Now, after Sidgwick, then, we do generate a number of ethical theories. And whoops, you can see I'm not very good at technology. We do generate ethical theories. And so we have this kind of, if you had a course in ethics, maybe you had it, you probably went through these theories, and if you had it, you've probably forgotten them all. They're usually divided into two categories, teleological and deontological. Teleological deals with the end or the purpose of acting, and there's a variety of theories that accompany that. You can be a consequentialist or a virtue teleologist. You can be an ethical egoist consequentialist teleologist or an act utilitarian consequentialist teleologist. And then there's some subfields in there, and people take an entire lifetime to write on one of these. Or you could be a deontologist, which means that you're committed to rules, obligations, principles. And then you could be monistic, pluralistic, communitarian, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a question that I've asked in a variety of spaces. How many of you who consider yourself ethical ever had your parents sit you down when you were young and said, now look, we want you to be ethical. You can be a consequentialist or you can be a deontologist. Here are your options. But what we want you to do is choose a theory and live consistent with it. I've never had anyone say yes to that question. Thanks be to God. Because I would worry about that person, right? And why? It's not because, I know these theories, I study these theories. It's not that the theories are bad, but it's because where is it that we learn our ethics? If I asked you all, are you ethical? I hope you would say yes. I hope no one would say, oh no, I tend to be unethical. I really don't, ethics is bad for business, ethics is bad for my career, I tend to be unethical. No one, I hope you wouldn't say that. The good is too basic to everyday life for us to at least admit it, even though we all would acknowledge that there have been compromises that we've all made at some point in our life, I'm sure. But where did we learn our ethics? What I like about Aristotle's ethics as against Sedgwick is it's not about a method, it's not about a theory, it's not about getting the right procedure, it's not about the right, it's about the good. And how did you learn how to be good? You learned how to eat with other people in cooperation around a table. You learned what it meant to do your share of the work around the home. You had a grandparent or a parent or a coach or a friend or someone whose life you thought, that's a good, wise person. I need to be like that. Maybe you were moved by a passage in Scripture or a story. We learn ethics from being rooted in the everyday. We learn ethics from being rooted in the everyday. And this is one of the potential dangers in teaching ethics, is that now you come in as the professor with all these theories, and you have these 30 students before you from very different walks of life, and you think your task is retraining camp, as if none of them have any ethics before they get to you, and now you're going to give them the theory which will allow them to be ethical, rather than build upon those practices, asking them, teaching them to be attentive to ordinary, everyday life and what it has already taught them. And then we'll talk about the place of theory after that. So teaching ethics, I think, can be potentially harmful if we assume that we have to, that ethics as a scientific discipline is kind of like what I did as a chemistry major in the lab. That you have to first sort of have an ideal observation that distances you from the histories, the narratives, the traditions that help constitute us as moral persons. We build on that formation. we shouldn't reject it. Ethics can also be dangerous, as the moral philosopher Alistair McIntyre, who, whoops, I think I'm one ahead. Yeah, the moral philosopher Alistair McIntyre, who taught ethics for years, still teaches at Notre Dame, taught at Duke, taught at Emory. He wrote a very interesting and controversial piece saying teaching ethics is actually harmful. First, he says, we have no good reason to believe that the teaching of ethics through academic courses can be effective in bringing about moral transformations. So there's no study, no discipline which says people who go through an ethics course come out better people than people who don't. And for those of us who teach ethics, I think that's concerning. Why is that? We even have some evidence that some people in certain forms of ethics come out worse. If you all know about Arthur Andersen and what happened to that firm, there's a wonderful book called Final Accounting, where one of the things that did that firm in was they realized you could market ethics because everybody likes it. And they had as part of a division of Arthur Andersen, Barbara Toffler ran it. It was a division of ethical accounting. And they thought we can really maximize profits through ethical accounting. And they even did some unethical things in their ethical accounting. But of course, it had the face of ethics. It had the face of ethics. Those of us who are ethicists are pretty good about knowing our way around ethical arguments and how to get out of your basic duties and obligations, you know. So maybe learning ethics actually does harm. Another thing McIntyre suggests is that in some occasions, an effective education into the virtues, and by that he means a different kind of ethics than Sidgwick's, something more like Aristotle's, can actually be difficult for your career. When I taught at the Jesuit, I taught at I did 2 tours with the Jesuits, even though I'm a Methodist pastor. And once in a while, you'd always have a student who would decide to become a priest or a nun or religious. And they would tell their parents, oh, I'm having a wonderful experience at college. Yes, thank you. Oh, I'm decided to become a religious. And some parents would find that very helpful, and other parents are like, wait a minute, I didn't send you to college for you to spend the rest of your life taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And it was, it's kind of like, this is not what we expected. Sometimes the ethical life means that certain options are not open for you. And you have to think about that. It might make you less effective in certain vocations. And McIntyre thinks that's the case, especially because, as he says in his third point in this controversial essay, an ethics of the virtues can be difficult because it will teach you to think about money in a different way. And often, when we think about our life in general, we think about it in a quantitative way, in a way that can be measured. There's this thing now we have in the university called ROI, return on investment. And I have to say, I'm not a fan of this way of thinking about a university education, because it turns students into customers and professors into something other than professors. It's not about wisdom, it's about effectiveness. This philosopher, McIntyre, suggests there's 2 ways of thinking about ethics and how you measure it. One is the standard of excellence. And that standard is about the virtues, wisdom. How do you cultivate wisdom? Courage. Where do you learn courage today? Justice. What does it mean to be a just human being? The virtues suggest that there's much more to ethics than discussions of what's right or wrong. There's a questions of wisdom. When should you be just? When should you be temperate? What does it mean to be a person of courage? And there are many other virtues. And so that the standard of excellence assumes there's an answer to the question, what is a good human life? It's not an easy answer. It's controversial. It's the reason I call my course The Good Life, because I know that's controversial. Say, what does it mean to be a good human being? And where do you find it? Where do you see a good human being? So that's the standards of excellence. It's not quantifiable. There's no way of measuring the standards of excellence, although I don't think that makes them any less objective than the standards of effectiveness. And then there's the standards of effectiveness, which tend to be quantifiable. Money, return on investment, utility. Sidgwick was a utilitarian who wanted to make ethics precise, and he actually thought one of his students developed a thing called the hedinometer, which would measure the utility that you receive from your actions, and if it increases the pleasure and diminishes the pain, that makes the action ethical. I just don't think the standards of effectiveness work in teaching ethics, and if you teach ethics that way, it seems to me you might be doing more harm than good. So, how then do we teach ethics? As I said, I do teach ethics for a living, as does Alistair McIntyre. So it's not like I don't think what I've been doing for 30 years is a waste of time. I'm not quitting tomorrow and taking a job back at the factory that I left 35 years ago. I think what's crucial in teaching ethics is first the question that you ask. Asking the right question is essential. I've discovered this over years of teaching, that sometimes students will give you the right answer, but to the wrong question. And that's always the most difficult. They'll give you a beautiful answer, and you'll think, oh, if only I had asked this question, you'd be getting an A. Alas, this was not the question that was asked. What question should you ask to initiate a course in ethics? One way to think about the question of ethics, and this was Sidgwick, and it's often the modern, is what should I do? What should I do? If you've ever seen that show on TV called The Good Life, it was about this. There's this thing that some ethicists talk about, the trolley problem, where there's a trolley coming down a hill and you happen to stand by a lever. There's 5 people on the train tracks over here and there's 10 people over here, and these are all elderly. These are 5 women with babies in their carriages. You have to make a split-second decision and decide, do you pull the lever so that the train will go one way rather than the other? What would you do? It's called quandary ethics. And you ask people these kinds of questions. And they can be illuminating. I don't mean to completely dismiss them, but I've never yet met anybody who actually faced the trolley problem in everyday life. And I always say, well, the first thing you should do is talk about the brakes on trolleys. I mean, they should work better. Maybe that's where we should begin ethics. But if you ask that question, what should I do, then I think what you miss is this question about what constitutes a good life. Ethics is not about action in a moment. It's about formation and character over a lifetime. The span of ethics is not just what would you do if, but who are you? Who am I? What constitutes a well-lived life? And if there's anything I enjoy, it's asking 19 to 22-year-olds, but also, everyone, what constitutes a well-lived life? What does it mean for us to live well as individuals, as collectives, as a society? And will that shift the way we think about answers to the ethical question? Now, I'm also a theologian, and I do try to bring theology into what I do, even in my moral philosophy classes. I mean, if you go through 4 years of undergraduate and you're never confronted with questions like, what is the good? What is truth? Is there a God? How would you know? If you're never confronted with those kinds of questions, it seems to me your education is wanting. You're going to miss something significant, even if you don't come down with the same answers that I do. Those are questions that should haunt us, and when they quit haunting us, I think we'll be less human. So I think those are important questions. So one of the things I also bring in is this uncomfortable conversation about what difference religion, what difference God might make for the way we think about ethics. Notice Aristotle's definition. Virtue is a state that decides, consisting in a mean, the mean relative to us, which is defined by reference to reason, to the reason by reference to which the prudent person would define it. So his understanding of ethics or virtue is that we have these internal sources, dispositions, that we form and habituate and cultivate to become a good human being. But we don't really need anything outside of us. It all comes internally. Now, the one exception to this, and this is what I love about Aristotle most, is friendship. He thinks good friends are crucial for ethics, and that if you don't have good friends, you really can't be a moral person. But that's the only source he has that's external to sort of the independent sources that we have, the internal sources. And there's sometimes these famous 4 women in England, at Cambridge, who revolutionized ethics when all the men were at war fighting, and they came back, and there's been a lot of work done with them, and one of them basically said, you know, it's as if these philosophers had never changed a baby's diaper. You know, like what did they forget somebody once gave them birth? You know, it's like that doesn't come up in ethics. Somebody changes your diaper at the beginning of life, and somebody will change it at the end of life, that you are not an independent, autonomous individual. You are going to be dependent upon other people at some point in your life. In fact, at every moment of your life. And that has to be taken into account. Now, St. Augustine said this about ethics. Virtue is a good quality of the mind by which one lives rightly, which no one uses badly, which God works in us without us. Now that always sort of caused a little bit of stress. What? I mean, ethics is something God does in me without me. Ethics is not my own achievement. It comes as a gift. And even though it requires theological convictions you may or may not have to side with St. Augustine, I think there's something right to what he says. Ethics comes as a gift, like our name comes to us as a gift. The thing that we introduce ourselves to others in the world before they ask us, what do you do for a living? Hi, I'm Steve Long, although my real name is Dwayne. And my middle name is Steve, and there's a very long story as to why I call myself Steve rather than Dwayne. It requires me to tell you about my parents. It requires a narrative and a history. It requires me to introduce you into my life. And all that comes as a gift. It was there before I even knew it was there. And I think in ethics, we have to be attentive to that. And if we miss that, if we think that we're autonomous individuals who only create ourselves de novo, we'll miss what it means. So finally, when I teach ethics, which I still don't know, I mean, I have to confess, I still don't know if I'm doing it right. My wife is an oncology nurse. She retired. And she would always say to me, if I make a mistake, people die. If you make a mistake, what happens? I never really knew how to answer that. People are unethical. I don't know. There's no quantifiable measurement by which I can say, you know, I failed or I succeeded, other than, quite frankly, the success or failure depends upon a well-lived life. And that's going to happen way down the road, way down the road. It reminds me of people who built great cathedrals in the Middle Ages, knowing they would never see them, and yet they would begin block by block, brick by brick. What patience did that take? What constancy of character? So finally, I go through all the ethical theories. I go through what I've done here today when I discuss ethics. But in the end, what I do is I ask students to read memoirs. I've chosen 5 memoirs which bring together practice and theory. And I say, look at these lives. These are successful lives. One of them that I read is called Rising Out of Hatred, about a white nationalist who was the heir apparent to David Duke. He was his godfather, if you know David Duke. And this young man, you know, he loves his family, but they taught him white supremacy. And then he had this amazing transformation, largely due to his friends. Fantastic book. And I asked the students, look at this life. How did this happen? Notice the turmoil, the tension. Notice all the things that had to be in place for him to realize that his rootedness in everyday life was problematic. So there is a place for theory. There is a place for critical reasoning. Aristotle also said the unexamined life is not worth living. And then I also have them read a simple book I love called A Shepherd's Life. A Shepherd's Life. If you haven't read these books, they're well worth reading. It's about this young man in northern England who all he wants to do is a shepherd. They're doing this same kind of sheep herding, sort of wild sheep herding that they've been doing since the Middle Ages. It's all he wants to do. But it's a difficult life because it's hard to preserve a way of life like that. And he's also really smart, even though he flunks out of high school. He realizes he's really smart, and he accidentally gets a full ride scholarship to Oxford, and he doesn't want to go because he just wants to be a sheep herder. So he agrees to go. He'll go to Oxford during the semester as long as he can come home and do sheep herding. And now he's he's still a shepherd to this day, and one of the leading environmental ethicists in the world because of the way he brought the practice of everyday life into conversation with the importance of theory in a university education. I don't know what kind of difference ethics teaching makes, but I'm hopeful. And I don't believe we can be anything other than hopeful. So thank you very much.
Dr. Long, thank you very much. That was very instructive. We're going to place, in thanks to you, a book in your honor in McShann Elementary. It probably won't be the methods of ethics, but
yeah,
it'll be an appropriate topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for being
Thanks.
with us today. Okay, next week, Herb Hammond is going to bring State Senator Nathan Johnson to talk to us about what to expect in the upcoming legislative session. Is that right, Herb? Right, we look forward to that very much. Now, Doug Ferber is going to rejoin to lead us in the four-way test, which I guess the questions that we as Rotarians ask ourselves and as we try to apply ethics.
Get a photo. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it bring goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you. Ringing the bell. And ringing the bell. Y'all have a great week.